Call the HRA to order. Roll call.
Ballinger.
Here.
Brenmone. Here. Jalali.
Here.
Naker.
Here.
Prince.
Here.
Tolbert.
Here.
Yang.
Here.
7 present, none absent. Item number 1, Men 22-32, approving the minutes of the August 2022 HRA meetings.
A motion to approve the minutes from Commissioner Brenmone. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion passes.
7 in favor, none opposed. The minutes are approved. Item number 2, SR 22-178, HRA-PED 2023 budget presentation.
Thank you. Director Goodman, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Tolbert, Commissioners. Can you hear me okay? I have this because that was so low. I want to make sure it didn't alter the sound. Today, I am happy to present the proposed Housing and Redevelopment Authority budget for 2023, which includes the operations budget for the Department of Planning and Economic Development, who provides staffing for the HRA. Before I start, I would like to thank Travis Bistadu, Rhonda Gilquist, Jenny Wolf, Luis Pereira, Tara Beard, and Jimmy Lloyd from my team, as well as Tara Baranuk and Director McCarthy from OFS for their assistance in preparing the budget this year. I have a lot to cover, so I will try to move fairly quickly through the slides, but feel free to stop me to ask questions along the way. I will start by reiterating our focus on equity. Of all of the departments in the city, PED should be able to be one of the most impactful in closing the gaps in economic opportunity. From our comp plan policies, to our housing work, to our economic development projects and programs, our planning, housing, and economic development teams are all making an impact with their work. Our planning director, recently hired housing director, and brand new economic development director are all deeply committed to equity and will be working much more closely together toward eliminating racial disparities in economic opportunity. Current areas of focus include homeownership, business ownership, and commercial property development. These are also areas where private capital is beginning to focus on equity. While I inherited an excellent team when I took over this role a couple of years ago, due to a retirement and a couple of other team members leaving for other opportunities, I have had the good fortune to add some amazing talent to our leadership team in PED. Planning Director Luis Pereira was hired as Planning Director in October of 2018. He's the one that is already here that we were fortunate to keep previously with PED, left for a bit, went a couple of places, and came back to PED in 2018. Travis Bistadu, I stole from DSI in 2021. Our new housing director, Tara Beard, was previously with the Met Council, had past experience in the city of Hopkins and the city of Minneapolis. She joined us in April. And our new economic development director, Jimmy Lloyd, was previously with Justice Built Communities and has past experience with the city of Brooklyn Center and the city of Minneapolis. As we are emerging from the impactful and transformative phenomenon of COVID-19, we have made some operational changes that reflect both some lessons we learned during the pandemic, as well as some new workplace realities resulting from the pandemic. Our department now is nearly paperless for our internal business and for our boards and commissions. We have implemented a hybrid return-to-office schedule with a minimum of 2 days a week in the office, which we feel is increasing collaboration and improving our communication, and also supports the recovery of downtown. As a major downtown employer, we feel it's important for us to have a presence. The hybrid schedule does align with the job market, and we're working on looking at maybe a hoteling kind of situation with people in 2 or 3 days a week. We may not need everyone to have a desk full-time with their name on it, so we're looking at options for maybe some hotel-style spaces. As with everyone is experiencing routine recruiting challenges. Recruiting has become challenging. Our central HR department has been incredibly supportive. They have worked on job studies and desk audits with us. We've had to have some temporary positions, but I can't say enough about HR and how helpful they've been. Moving into the budget discussion, I would like to revisit some risks and opportunity costs that I described to you in my presentation last year. In 2022, we outlined really enormous risks and opportunity costs connected to low staffing levels and system deficits, including but not limited to a large loan portfolio with many loans past due or requiring workouts, and concerns about compliance requirements. We have approximately 200 HRA properties for redevelopment. Some have been owned by the HRA for decades, costing approximately $1 million a year to maintain, not increasing the tax base as they should be. And we have had HUD audit findings that carry risks of financial penalties, including repayment of funds and loss of future grant funds. Since last year's presentation, we've taken several actions to mitigate those risks that I want to go over with you. We have hired a loan servicing and real estate supervisor who has reviewed the portfolio and is developing a loan servicing strategy. We expect to begin implementation in this quarter, third quarter and fourth quarter of 2022. The goal there, what I learned, is that our project managers were spending as much as 70% of their time managing like old neighborhood star loans. Like they would do a project, and then the project lived with them through the life of the loan. So instead, we will move the loan servicing to that central function, which will be much more efficient. Someone whose full-time job is to service those loans. Then the project managers can manage projects, get RFPs out, move HRA land. It will just be so much more efficient. So that was one of the things that we've done to mitigate some of the risks that we mentioned last year. We have released some at least a few RFPs, and we have more to come. The RFP on the Hams Brewery Complex is very exciting. We received 5 proposals. We're in the process of interview and selection. We've put out an RFP for Inspiring Communities, round 7, with 12 HRA-owned parcels. We've drafted an RFP for the Hafner site, so we'll be releasing that soon. And we have other parcels that are ready to go, ready for development on Payne Avenue and Marshall Avenue that we'll be drafting those RFPs very soon, now that we'll have project managers with some capacity besides servicing old loans. We've also added capacity to our HUD grants team to address those deficiencies in HUD audits and concerns that we had there. The program administrator position was added through ARP funding. A job study has been complete for a grant compliance supervisor, and we're adding a CAO legal assistant through grants admin funding. Our 2023 budget strategy continues to address those risks and continues the primary approaches we implemented last year. So we will continue to add a supervisory level to one division each year. When I got here, the organizational structure was super flat. Everyone in each division reported to the division director. So each division director had 15 or 17 direct reports, which is it's not workable. In 2022, we added supervisory levels in housing. This year in 2023, we'll add them in planning, and in economic development, we'll look for those supervisory positions to be added in 2024. We are continuing to improve our efficiency in existing programs and processes, again, centralizing that loan servicing supervisor, formalizing the arts and culture coordinator position. So that would be a position that would manage 1% for public arts, which we pulled over from OFE, and Cultural Star, so kind of combining those responsibilities, but improving the processes for both programs. I came from a city with a very strong 1% for public arts program that I was deeply involved with, so I had some experience there. And I was thrilled to be able to bring that over to PED and kind of combine those efforts. And then we aren't, again, same as last year, not proposing new programming other than the ARPA programs. We're focusing on just continuing to improve the processes and outcomes for the programs that we have in place. We will continue to work toward a balanced HRA budget. I will cover that more in this presentation as we go. So maximizing the levy and increasing general fund support are themes you've heard over and over every year as we've made this presentation. I will cover that more deeply as we go through the presentation. And finally, for the 2022 approach that we're continuing, we're finalizing the technology implementation to improve and minimize errors and risks. We have never had in PED a centralized system to track our investments over time and a mechanism to manage projects effectively. So we've been working toward an investment tracking system prior to even to my joining the organization, but the budget was initially established in 2021. An RFQ was issued in fall of 2021, RFP in spring of 2022. We've had demonstrations from vendors, and we expect a selection, contracting, and project initiation by January 1st of 2023, or by the end of this year. Once we have a vendor selected, though, we will need to add a full-time position to manage that system. So our total staffing request, and I will be going through this further again in our presentation, is for $300,000, but all of that is existing budget cost savings and through attrition. So I'll outline that further. This slide summarizes our budget proposal for this year. Again, I'll go deeper into detail as we move through the presentation, but our overall proposal for this year is to increase the HRA levy by $500,000, which will utilize approximately 99.8% of the projected total capacity under state law maximum cap. For a median value St. Paul home, that would be about $4.68 in additional taxes. We would add $200,000 in city general fund just to support general PED operations, and we'll talk about the budget gap that's coming and the cliff, and this will be a tiny little drop towards addressing that. It's going to have to get better in the next few years. And then repurposing existing budgeted funds to support the addition of that supervisory level in planning. And our major investments for 2023, again, no new programs, $2 million. The remainder would be carryover for the fifth-year commitment in Housing Trust Fund, $300,000 plus $70,000 in carryover for ongoing full-stack programs, $100,000 plus $100,000 carryover for ongoing strategic investment fund, using only the carryover for the ongoing citywide business assistance, and $50,000 for ongoing maintenance for the investment tracking system once we get that in place. So I will go into details about those as we're going through. I want to talk a little bit about...
One moment, Commissioner Naker.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Chair Tolbert. And I know, Dr. Goodman, you're going into more detail, but just so I understand, so the $300,000 for full stack, the $100,000 for strategic investment fund, when you say ongoing, are those new dollars that will be ongoing, or are those, is that
Nope.
already in the base budget and it's just going to continue?
Excellent question. Chair Tolbert, Councilmember Naker, ongoing just means ongoing programs. So the carryover is just funding from last year, and then we're adding funding for this year, and all of that is for ongoing programs. So it's not to suggest that the funding is being committed on an ongoing basis.
So for example, for the strategic investment fund, what is the base budget every year?
It's the same. By ongoing, we mean it's the same strategic investment program. The budget varies by year, but the program is nothing new. So that was just to highlight that we're not, over the years, PED has every year had new programs, and then the programs that exist were not necessarily managed very efficiently or effectively, so ongoing is just to say it's not a new program. The dollar amount has varied by year, and it will probably continue to.
Okay, just when in other budget presentations, when there's a number and it says ongoing versus one time, I know what you're saying, ongoing means the ongoing program, but I guess I'm just trying to figure out, so is this a $300,000 one-time investment in an ongoing program?
That's correct.
Okay.
And when I get to that slide, we can cover it again, Councilmember, if it doesn't make sense, but that's an excellent question, and thank you for asking for that clarification. Okay. Let's talk a bit about the primary HRA funds and requirements for reserves or fund balances. And Councilmember Ballinger, this will be a little bit different from what you've heard in other presentations, but the other commissioners have heard this before. This is where the HRA is a little different from the other departments. Whether there are restrictions on uses or reserves or on reserves of fund balances varies by fund type. So the HRA General Fund and Loan Enterprise Fund are the only dollars that are unrestricted. While there is no formal policy, we retain a 15% operating reserve for the HRA General Fund and Loan Enterprise Fund, including the HRA portion of the PED operations budget. The parking fund includes a number of reserves, both those required by lenders and best practices, including reserves to cover debt service, repairs, and operations. You've seen these numbers, these slides before. They're the same slides every year, but they're different numbers, of course. HRA revenues flow into a number of different accounting funds. This slide, and it may be hard to read on the screen, but you should have it in your packet, is an overview of those funds. These numbers, the numbers in the right-hand column represent the amounts for operations or investments that are charged to each of these funds, and the amount that will be charged in excess of what is available is the amount we dip into the fund balance for that account. So some of the fund balances are restricted to particular uses, some are more flexible. The top two accounts, the HRA General Fund and the HRA Loan Enterprise Fund, are the flexible funds. So you can see in 2023, it is estimated that we will utilize over $13 million of the various fund balances to cover expenses. After this year, there will be very little left of the fund balances. This slide and the following slide are the two funds you are used to seeing. This is the HRA General Fund Summary. The numbers in the left-hand column, again, are the sources of funds that go into the account. The numbers in the right-hand column represent the amounts for operations or investments that are charged to this account. And again, the line on the left that says use of unrestricted balance is where we dip into that fund balance on this account. And this is the other fund you were used to seeing, the HRA Loan Enterprise Fund. Again, left-hand side is the sources, right-hand side is the uses. The line on the left that says use of unrestricted fund balance is the dipping into the fund balance. And this is the breakdown of the operating cost for PED. Revenues on the left, expenses on the right. The top four sources are HRA sources. That number representing at the bottom, PED operations supporting other city departments, covers staff in the mayor's office. And you've seen this slide many times before, but this table is a breakdown of the transfers out of HRA funds to support other city functions. And I give you all of this so that I can highlight again that the day is coming. In the past, the HRA has been supported by one-time infusions of cash, such as the sale of significant assets, maybe the Seven Corners Gateway property or the Spruce Tree Ramp. And for the past several years and looking forward, though, we do not have those major assets to sell or other anticipated one-time infusions of cash. As we've mentioned over the past several years, the HRA budget has included the use of those fund balances of the HRA General Fund and the HRA Loan Enterprise Fund to cover that gap in the HRA budget. But those fund balances have now dwindled to almost nothing. So this chart just shows without intervention, in 2025, we could have as much as a $7 million deficit in the HRA budget. We have been working with OFS since I've been here for a couple of years to start thinking of how we might be able to address that impending budget gap. Every year we have asked for city general fund dollars, and we've gotten a little bit of that. But potential solutions to that gap include, but are not limited to, again, increasing general fund, city general fund support for PED operations, reducing those transfers out, which is one of the tables that I've just gone over a few minutes ago, those transfers out to support other city operations, activating a property disposition strategy now that I have someone full-time in that position who's looking at our portfolio, figuring out a strategy for how to start moving these HRA properties, and having project managers with capacity to do so will add to the tax base, will reduce our property management expenses, so that both will help with the gap. A minor improvement would be increasing zoning-related fees, and as a last resort, we could reduce programming or staffing levels. We obviously don't want to have to do that, but so I bring that to you just to say we've been talking about this for many years, and I've been telling you since I've been here that we are looking at how we can deal with that. It will have to come with some. I feel like it will have to come with some city general fund, more than a couple $100,000, but this is what we've been working on. Moving to the parking fund, parking revenues.
One moment, Director.
Oh, go ahead, certainly.
If you could just pop back for a quick second. I realize that this is a slide about budget gap solutions.
Yes.
But I do want to say that during the housing crisis in the 2010-11, we acquired lots and lots of properties, and I know that had been the practice in the past, and we've focused heavily on, we had just too many, and we've been focusing really heavily on getting rid of the properties we have for the reasons that you state there. I'm curious, though, at some point, that we've had conversations about vacant housing lots, and is there any appetite at some point in the not too distant future to start doing some acquisition again, to do some strategic reinvestment? Because I feel like we're kind of at a different place in the pendulum, and it may be time, as we're seeing sites open, like my eyes are wandering around in different parts of town, one that I'm going to show Councilmember Ballinger, but that we might want to start stepping into that role again. And I know that's called spending money, but it also is about expanding that tax base. I'm wondering about that.
Thank you, Chair Tolbert. Commissioner Brimmoen. Yes, we've been talking with DSI about that as well. We and the county, there are different ways in which the city might be able to acquire properties, either tax forfeit properties or vacant and abandoned properties. There are processes. It's complicated. I have had some experience with that kind of program in the past as well in another city. So Certainly, it's an idea. It would increase housing. It's not a huge revenue producer typically. It's more about not having those vacant properties or abandoned properties, which is great and helpful and impactful, but not so much of a budget help. But we are certainly looking at those. So that's an excellent question. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving to the parking fund. As with every city in the country, parking revenues were significantly impacted by the pandemic and still with changes in office work practices. Pre-pandemic, our parking system generated a net operating income of nearly $10 million in 2019. In 2020, it was down to $4.1 million, and 2021 was only $1.7 million. Some slightly good news is that our 2022 actuals are exceeding the adopted budget. I'll say that we set the bar pretty low for the adopted budget. We had some unexpected revenues due to really a lot of events at the arena and downtown and some daily parking. Our monthly contracts are growing very slowly, and our revenues are still far below pre-pandemic levels. Something I'll flag as well as many office leases are coming to an end, and they'll keep coming to an end, and so there are parking contracts that are tied to those leases that are still in place. So we may not have lost everything we're going to lose in the way of parking contracts. As leases come up, if they aren't renewed, we may lose additional parking contracts, so I want to add that caution. So it feels like things are better, and they're better than we expected them to be, but I have a little bit of concern about some sort of rebounding with leases coming up. Office space leases that then are tied to contracts and parking. Although the parking fund currently has sufficient reserves for debt service, the deficits in revenue due to COVID have eliminated all of the unrestricted cash and operating reserves. So ARP funding will be critical in filling this gap. You have seen this diagram over the years, and it indicates the various types of required and prudent reserves and the respective decline of many of those reserves due to the steep decline in parking revenues in 2020 and 2021. I say all that to just, again, highlight that the stabilization in the parking fund with ARP funds is really critical and is a very common use around the country.
Excuse me.
Yes,
Commissioner
certainly.
Naker?
Go ahead.
Thanks, Chair Tolbert. Dr. Goodman, sorry, going back a slide, can you remind us which of those colored bars are required to be reserved by debt and which ones are the best practices that you referred to?
Let's see if I know the answer to that question. I don't know. I don't know if I know the answer to which are required.
Looks like that.
But repair and replacement reserves are probably not required. Debt service is required. Bond-funded debt service is required. The bottom two are definitely required. I would say the rest are probably the prudent reserves. Director McCarthy may be able to nod at me. That's correct.
Okay. So it's about $13 million in reserves, half of which are debt required.
Right. Again, we have enough in reserves to cover debt service. Those are required. None of the prudent reserves are where we'd like for them to be. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Again, the stabilization of the parking fund with ARP funds is critical. It's a very common use of ARP funds across the country as parking revenues plummeted everywhere across the country. Our HRA parking revenues again declined approximately 75%. The reserves have been used to pay for critical debt service. This is kind of reiterating what was there. Just to point out, though, that ARP dollars can be used to make capital repairs, structural repairs, failing parking control equipment, and there will be a budget amendment before City Council soon to make that official request for ARP support to the parking fund. Also funded with American Rescue Plan Act funds, we have completed our first solicitation of the 30% AMI program to produce deeply affordable housing to households with incomes at 30% or less of area median income. You have seen this slide recently, so I won't spend a lot of time on it, but we have closed on 2 of the selected projects, and we are working to finalize the other 3. Another significant ARP program we managed this year was for tourism support. The City Council approved in February $4.5 million for a PED-led program to provide grants to qualifying organizations who significantly impact tourism in the city. PED opened a competitive application process in May, and the City Council awarded grants to 7 organizations, which you can see on the chart. All of the grant agreements have been executed and disbursements are underway, and annual reports will be submitted to PED from these organizations in June of 2023. Moving to specific division budget items, we'll start with housing. This slide covers the Housing Trust Fund activity, including significant spending and outcomes in the areas of 4D NOAA preservation, community land trust work, down payment assistance, permanent supportive housing, and the Families First housing pilot. As you can see, in looking at outcomes, we've preserved over 1,700 units of naturally occurring affordable housing through the 4D program. In supporting the Rondo Community Land Trust, there's a new executive director who's been there about a year, Micaiah Griffin. She has significantly expanded staff and has the closings, their acquisitions, have increased significantly. So I know that's an organization you're all familiar with. There was a director in place for a long time. There's a new director there and a new staff and new energy, and we're really excited to be working with them moving forward. We funded 41 new low-income homebuyers with our down payment assistance program, and we've supported housing stability for 51 extremely low-income families through the Families First housing pilot. I want to point out that the Families First housing pilot was a program that was implemented through the schools, and it started just as COVID happened. So we haven't been able to get out as much as we would like, just because of the unfortunate circumstance that it was a school kind of directed. We would reach the families through them at school, and then they weren't at school. But we're kind of back to re-energize that program and look to see a lot more activity there going forward. I just want to go over this slide then with and you've seen this, I think, recently as well. What's next? What's planned with the Housing Trust Fund for this year? Approximately $6 million in Housing Trust Fund programming is planned for 2023, including the $2 million annual commitment that we're seeking this year, and then the rest would be just carryover funds. 4D, program administration, so we have to pay for administrative requirements necessary to achieve the property tax reduction. So it's 1,000 additional affordable units would be preserved through the rate reduction. That doesn't look like a lot of money because that's just the admin dollars. That's part of the program. With the Community Land Trust investment.
Director Goodman.
Certainly.
On the 4D program, which I think is a great program, that it's basically using a different source of resources. Have we calculated the amount of taxes we've abated or foregone through that program?
Chair Tolbert, that's an excellent question. I did actually ask that question earlier today. I don't have that answer yet, but I will. That was a question I thought you might ask, and so we're doing that research. I think it's been done. It's not completely updated. Okay, thank you. But I will get back with you on that, and that's an excellent question. On the Community Land Trust work, with the $1 million investment, 15 low-income households would achieve home ownership, and 15 additional homes would be perpetually affordable in St. Paul. The down payment assistance, and this does include the new inheritance fund, which is not a new program, but just an additional layer on our current down payment assistance program. We anticipate 35 additional households to be served. The NOAA Preservation Program, this is a program that's been planned that Director Schuckman was working on when she was here, and now Director Beard is working on. It will be, I have a whole slide about it, so I'll tell you more about that in just a moment. But that's a 2023 solicitation that will be coming up hopefully in the next few months. And then staffing related to Housing Trust Fund programs. So these are highlights. We will be coming forward with more details of each of these programs as we move forward with them. But I'm going to give you more information about the Inheritance Fund and the NOAA Preservation Program now. So the two programs.
One moment, please.
Certainly.
Commissioner Naker.
Thanks, Chair Tolbert. Director Goodman, how much is in the Housing Trust Fund currently, and how much do we aim to spend every year? It looks like $6 million this year, but is that sort of standard every year?
Chair Tolbert, Commissioner Naker, that's a great question, and it's very hard to sometimes follow, because what happens is what's budgeted, what we ask for often is, or what we plan for, those sources that don't come to fruition, or we don't need them, so we don't pull from them. For example, there was budgeted each of the years that you'll see on the slide here. 6 million, 5 million, 5 million, 2 million. Those numbers included World Trade Center ramp revenues that didn't come to fruition, and the potential for a city loan to fill a gap if there were enough demand for a program, if we got programs out. Because of emergency rent assistance and other things that we had to pivot to and weren't able to focus on our housing trust fund programs, we didn't use as much, so we didn't pull as much. So what actually has been funded is $12.5 million, and what we've allocated is what's there below that, which I think is about let's see, total budget. Let's see if I have that number. 6.2 million. So that leaves the 6 million. Does that make sense? So we've allocated 12.5 million, and this would count 2 million, and then all of those. We've budgeted 12.5 million. We've allocated what you see there, and the difference would be what we have left, the 6 million. There's not 6 million put in there every year. It's a $2 million a year commitment that was made at some point back in the past before I got here.
So if there's 6 million left and there's follow-up, and 6 million planned for spending this year, does that mean we're spending down the entire trust fund this year?
If we were somehow able to get all $3 million out in the NOAA preservation program in 1 year, yes.
Okay.
But the likelihood of all of that money going out this year is slim, but it's possible. I would say the likely place where it wouldn't all go out is in the families in the NOAA preservation program, and here, let me go down. I'm sorry. In the NOAA preservation program, that's where it's the most likely to probably not all go out this year. But if somehow we could get all of that out, and if we had enough applications for down payment assistance, which we could spend the $6 million this year.
And just one last question. I had thought in previous years when we had talked about how there was carryover year to year, you had said that the goal is to have some amount that is carried over from year to year to build up the fund over time. And that's where I'm wondering, again, is that still true? And so is spending all of it down what we want to do? And maybe it'd be helpful as a follow-up just to see like total amount there, total amount we've spent, total amount left over. But I'm just wondering what the overall strategy is for something that's an ongoing trust.
Chair Tolbert, Commissioner Nickert, that's a great question. And in the past, the board has had questions about why is the money sitting there, right? And it is typical in housing trust funds across the country that funds sit there in case it's a trust fund, right? It's meant to be sitting there. However, I know this body's had a lot of questions about that. So we're proposing this basically enough to add to cover kind of this programming for 2023. And it's unlikely we would get through all of it this year. It's possible, but there's not like a pot of money sitting there. This is what would be there, and we would get out as much of it as we could this year. Does that make sense? But we can certainly follow up and give you more detail on what's gone in, what's gone out, and what's planned.
Okay. Thank you.
If that's helpful. Okay. See where we are. Okay, Inheritance Fund. I think you've had a briefing about this fairly recently, but the two programs we are proposing modifying this year are the down payment assistance and the homeowner rehab programs. To add the opportunity for additional funding within these existing programs to individuals who are direct descendants of property owners whose properties were taken as a result of the construction of I-94 in St. Paul. These families lost the opportunity for significant amounts of generational wealth, which cannot be wholly restored with this program, but is meant to make a significant impact in that loss of wealth building opportunity. So the regular fund would continue to provide up to $40,000 for income qualifying homebuyers. The inheritance fund piece would offer $50,000 to $60,000 in additional down payment assistance to qualifying descendants. The way that you can think about it is through these sort of check boxes. We tried to demonstrate that if you're 60% AMI or less, you check that off, you're eligible for the regular program, $40,000. If you're 80% AMI and a direct descendant, additional $50,000. If you're 80% AMI or less and you're looking to purchase a home within the historic boundaries of Rondo, there's an extra $10,000. So up to $100,000 for a descendant of direct descendant of a family whose property was lost, and you meet those income restrictions. Does that make sense? We tried to outline it in a way that made sense. I know it's a little confusing, but it's not a new program. It's just an addition to our current program.
Commissioner Prince.
Thank you, Chair Tolbert. And I'm very interested in this, obviously. As you know, this council passed a resolution to explore reparations in January of 2021. And we seated a legislative advisory committee that met for a year diligently to develop an ordinance to create a permanent commission on reparations. And that is the ordinance we expect to pass as a council, I believe, yet this year. The mayor will be appointing that commission. And one thing I would like us to do is acknowledge that this inheritance fund, which is an idea that I think would be of great interest to the reparations group, was never discussed with that group when it was meeting. They made multiple efforts to meet with the mayor as they were meeting this year. And so I would hope that when we're looking at programs to do that fall into this category of reparations, and definitely people who lost their homes to Rondo was very much a focus of the discussion of the reparations group. So I want us not to be going down two separate paths here. So I look forward to that being coordinated. This is obviously the HRA, where the mayor does not have a role. So I think it makes a lot of sense for our staff to be looking at the work that the council is doing with reparations, the passage of the ordinance yet this fall, and the appointment of a commission that can help to process this program.
Chair Tolbert, Councilmember Prince, absolutely. We are looking forward to the commission being seated. And as we're working out the details of this program, when they're in place, we will absolutely communicate with them and coordinate with them. They are certainly the same lines of work, and we acknowledge and appreciate that.
Thank you.
Moving on to the other program we are proposing modifying is the homeowner rehab program, which would also add to the opportunity for additional funding to direct descendants. So again, it's just a regular fund. We'll continue to provide up to $25,000 for income qualifying homeowners, and the inheritance fund would offer additional rehab funds to qualifying descendants. So very similar, checkbox, 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 and the layers add. Yes, Chair Tolbert.
And just a refresher on the program, just the general program, how long does someone need to stay in the property, and is it for any neighborhood in St. Paul, or is it specific neighborhoods that we're trying to get homeownership increased in?
Chair Tolbert, for the down payment assistance program, it's for any part of the city. There's an extra bump if it's in Rondo, but it's for any part of the city. The down payment assistance piece, which is this one, our goal, what we'd like to change actually about the current down payment assistance program and going forward is it would be a 15-year affordability requirement. We currently have a 30-year affordability requirement on our down payment assistance, and the way it's currently written is you could be there 29 years and sell it and not get any credit for any of that time. What we'd like to do, and it's more consistent with other down payment assistance programs, is make it a 15-year time period, and that you would get like proportional credit over the time that you're there. So if you're there for 12 years, you would only have to repay that sort of proportional payment of it. So those are guidelines that we'll be bringing back to you, recommendations to change those guidelines as part of the sort of adjustment in addition to this program.
So right now, they have to repay the loan if they're there less than 29 years?
Less than 30 years.
Okay, yeah, that's very long.
It's very long.
And it's currently not prorated
At all.
at all?
That's
okay.
correct.
I would suggest we should
Indeed.
change that, both of those things.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair Tolbert. We agree.
We have members who aren't 29 years old in this council. Sorry. Commissioner Naker.
Thanks, Chair Tolbert. Dr. Goodman, I know we'll be having more conversation about the inheritance fund since we had talked about how the specific rules will be coming through HRA for approval. But I'm curious if you have an estimate as to how many Rondo descendants there are who would be eligible and how many might be able to receive assistance with the amount that we're budgeting. I'm just trying to get a sense of the potential. I know it depends a bit on how many boxes are checked, but just trying to get even a high-level picture of, are we talking about most of the families who would be eligible, a very small handful?
Chair Tolbert, Councilmember Naker, that is a great question. What we do know, we have research on the properties, right? So we have research on the properties. We have to determine what is going to be like an eligible piece of evidence that you're a direct descendant, and then the other the income requirements, and there are other things that people have to be able to buy a house. There are other things besides down payment assistance that render someone sort of eligible to buy a house, right? So that's a very good question. I think we don't have an answer. We'll have to see how things start to come in. I'll say that there's similar programs. There's a similar program in Portland, not exactly the same, but I think that there weren't as many as they thought there might be who, by the time you went through the process, but there were several. So I don't know. I don't have an answer. I wish that I could give you a better answer, but I can tell you that we're looking at there were X number of properties, and these are the qualifiers, and what's that universe look like, and we'll just kind of have to see how demand looks and how it plays out. Is that helpful?
Yeah,
okay.
Somewhat. Thank
you. So
it makes sense.
Commissioner Prince?
And I think to that point, that's a question that I have is, what's a typical down payment on an average home? So what percentage for a low-income buyer would be expected?
Councilmember Prince and Chair Tolbert, it really depends on the amount of the property, the price of the property, which, as you know, the median household or the median property cost in the city in every city has gone up so much. That's why $100,000 sounds like a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of the cost of buying a new home, it's really not. So it would depend on the type of mortgage. Many mortgages require a 20% down payment. Some mortgages for very excellent credit candidates are less than that, or if you have other qualifiers. So in this case, the goal would be to really fortify that ability to put down a significant down payment and add to the affordability and the wealth building opportunity of that property.
Because, obviously it's $2 million. If it's $100,000 per homeowner, that's 20 families that would be able to purchase it. So I think the number of potential descendants is an important question. And I think we have several programs that we are doing in the city where it ends up being kind of a lottery, and I worry about that because it's kind of first in, who's paying attention, and I just think that we need better information about what is a reasonable down payment, and is $100,000 really needed if a person can get whether it's $40,000 or $50,000 down payment, and so I think we need more information.
Chair Tolbert, Councilmember Prince, those are great questions. I'll say that the amount is meant to be far more than what would be needed just for down payment, because it's meant to mitigate some of that wealth loss, right? So it's that kind of piece of not necessarily reparations, because it's not 100% of what was lost, but mitigating that wealth loss. So the number is there for that reason. The interesting and nice thing about this kind of program is two things. People come into the time frame in their life that they're interested in buying a home, and like every year there will be different people who are eligible, right? Who are direct descendants who are now ready to buy a home. So it's not everyone today. And we've had interest, and I know we'll get more interest in private and philanthropic support for this program. So it may be that we're able to leverage our dollars with other dollars to expand the program if successful and there's demand.
Right.
So that's what I would hope to see.
Well, and again, I think that is why it's valuable for us to look at this in the context of the reparations work we've done, which has been very thoughtful by a group of people who worked for a year. And I think that foregoing this opportunity for this community or this commission to put together a process and a way of evaluating these things, I think we're missing an opportunity to use the good work that's been done by this council on the reparations issue. So again, we should not forego that next step.
Understood. Chair Tolbert, Councilmember Prince, understood. And we're not too late to involve them in the development of the program. For
Great.
certain.
Good.
All right, I want to make sure that I get through my slides if possible. That may not be possible, but we'll go as far as we can. On the NOAA Preservation Program, it's a big number, and just to kind of cover a little bit about it, the city loses far more naturally occurring affordable housing units annually than are replaced with newly constructed affordable units. As you know, rehabilitation of affordable housing continues to be the most cost-effective way to meet low and moderate income housing needs. Developers, often emerging developers, continue to express an interest in acquiring and rehabbing these properties while committing to maintaining their affordability. This program would subsidize and support long-term affordability. The funding will be contingent on long-term affordability commitments, deed restrictions, and it would coordinate with our other preservation programs such as 4D and rental rehab to maximize our ability to preserve existing affordable housing in the city. We look for a solicitation in the first or second quarter of next year, though I will tell you again, like Director Beard inherited the beginnings of this program from Director Schuckman, and so we're still working out details. I would say that if we have a solicitation, it might be nice to have a rolling solicitation, so it's, again, not that sort of first in, but like there's an opportunity when someone's ready and they see a property that they're able to come and talk to us about it. So it's still in development, but I did want to give you a little bit more information about it just because you hadn't seen much about it in the past. And we'll go into the Economic Development Division. Again, our new ED director joined us in July. Since then, he's been working with staff to learn their roles and responsibilities and how to best leverage their talents to improve our work. We are working to prepare an RFP to issue for professional services to craft a citywide economic development strategy in 2023. I think the last one was done in maybe 2017, so it's time. We were kind of waiting to have our new ED director on board to begin talking about that process. So, and then Director Lloyd has been evaluating our current programs and to assess effectiveness and areas where we can improve performance and processes. He and I are both process people, so we speak the same language in that area. So that's kind of what we've been working on in ED programs.
One moment, please.
Yes,
Commissioner Prince?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Director Goodman, but this was on the NOAA issue.
Oh, go ahead.
I just have a quick question on that. You know, in November of last year, we were getting ready to support Aon in purchasing Ridgewood Apartments in my ward, which was a significant NOAA purchase. I'm assuming that we don't need a program if we were to have those opportunities. I mean, that the program doesn't have to be, I mean, I don't know what program we were doing that through, but I wouldn't want to lose those opportunities because we haven't really figured out NOAA.
Chair Tolbert, Commissioner Prince, that's a great question. We do have programs, funding now that we can sometimes support NOAA preservation.
Okay.
This would be not in place of that, but in addition to that, just to add some more flexibility and capacity there. But
Very
that's
good, because that really is an important effort
Yes,
for
certainly.
our larger projects that we're losing to outside
Absolutely.
investors.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to move to the Full Stack highlights. Full Stack is one of our primary programs of our Economic Development Division. List here of kind of 2022 highlights. Lots of tech training scholarships. I know you had a recent presentation about this program, and Chair Tolbert's very involved in Full Stack. Sponsored community tech and innovation events with hundreds of attendees. We're advancing the fourth round of the Restaurant Resiliency Project and leveraging support from the Knight Foundation on that. and have developed a promotion subcommittee with a new steering committee member and a Lowertown digital communications business leader. But to get into the funding, our budget proposal for full stack for this year includes some carry forward from last year, $70,000, and then another $300,000 proposed for this year. And you'll see how that's broken down, $180,000 for tech training scholarships with MSP Tech Hire, which is what we've done in the past, $55,000 for communications and marketing staffing on social media and website and public relations, which is similar to last year, $60,000 for event sponsorship for tech and innovation events in the community, which also something we've always done. And then $75,000 for a youth tech incubator and entrepreneurship program. That one is sort of still in development. That's the one I would say that we still have some details to work out on. It sounds promising though, and we want to move forward in trying to make that happen.
Commissioner Naker?
Thanks, Chair Tolbert. So why do we need a roughly $1,000 smaller budget in 23 than we did in 22?
Chair Tolbert, Commissioner Naker, these are the programs that we have planned for this year, and that's just what we have programmed. So I don't know that it's necessarily that we're dropping anything or not doing anything that we've been doing. It's pretty similar. What I would have to look back to see if there was something significant we spent in 2022 that we're not doing this year, and I'll have to get back to you on that. I don't have last year's numbers in front of me. Trying to think.
Yeah, it seems like generally in several of these funds, the bottom line shifts around a lot from year to year, and the amount that we carry over shifts around from year to year. It seems to me like there should be a standard budget that might go up or down based on the changes in costs. But if we needed $525,000 in 1 year,
Right.
It seems like there should be a reason why we need a smaller amount, or did we not need that much, last year? So it would just be helpful to sort of understand, especially for programs like Full Stack that are more established at this point, like, what is the what of them and what do we spend on them year over year?
Understood. Chair Tolbert, Commissioner Naker, I will get you more information about that. Sometimes it just depends on, in 2020, we may have not gotten things out because of COVID, and so we probably had more carryover that we needed to get out last year. So I can get you more details on that. I hear you that it's like theoretically should be similar each year, and I can get you more detail on that. I will say that a trend line from 2020 to 2021 to 2022 is going to look different everywhere because of COVID. So I'll have to see what that was, but I'll get back to you on it.
And this isn't just, by the way, because I like seeing the same number across rows
No,
of
I
an Excel
understand.
spreadsheet. I know we have budget challenges, and so if we turned out we don't need a certain amount, I'd like
Right.
to use that for other purposes.
Understood. All right. Citywide business assistance. You might remember that there was a funding out there when I got here that was sort of not programmed very well, and there weren't really guidelines, and it wasn't on the website, and so we tried to formalize that and get it on the website so that businesses would know it was available. It was really one that was like, unless you knew about it, you didn't know about it. So we brought Business Assistance Fund guidelines to the board in February and really put it on the website, started to talk to businesses about it. Haven't moved very much of it. I think we had 800,000 and something, maybe 850. We're moving 665 forward to this year, but we have really focused on, there are, of course, a list of businesses who the STAR program is way oversubscribed, so are those businesses that can be helped, or other businesses. We've done a lot of more outreach in an effort to kind of do a better job there. The economic development team is revising the service delivery model, a more efficient application process, much more outreach, looking at the businesses that we know that are there that are in need from various applications they've made in the past or other programs. So now that the program is in place, the guidelines are in place, the economic development director is here, we've staffed back up, I feel like we'll be able to move on that one a lot more this year than we did last year. The Strategic Investment Fund, this is a fund that...
Commissioner Naker?
Oh, certainly.
Thanks, Chair Tolbert. I think every year we ask for that list of how much has been spent out of each of the funds. Did we request that this year or get it? And if not, could we request it and get it? The
Chair Tolbert?
Strategic Investment Fund, Business
Right.
Assistance Fund, just how much was spent in the year just passed?
Chair Tolbert, Commissioner Naker, I am not positive of the answer to that question, but if you have not received it, we will get it to you.
Okay. Thank you.
Make a note. All right. How are we doing on time? I think I'm getting pretty close to the end. The Strategic Investment Fund is something that many cities have. It's like pay for jobs. You use it to try to attract companies to come to St. Paul who aren't here now, so they're profitable businesses that are currently operating outside of St. Paul, and we try to convince them to come here, and depending on the job and how much it pays, there's like an X amount per job incentive to come to St. Paul. We did not use our. This one is one that is very common to not use from year to year because there just may not be a prospect. There may be a great prospect this year that would require, or a couple of them, or three, that we would use it all, or we may not, but our goal this year is to do a lot more focused outreach on corporate business retention and attraction, partnering more with the Chamber and St. Paul Downtown Alliance and others, and the Port. So we've been focusing on that, and so I really have ideas about prospects of companies that we know about that might be interested in coming here. So this is something that's been set up. It is common among cities. Usually it's funded much more than this. Hasn't been utilized much here, but we want to lean into that this year. So we would like to carry over the 100 and add 100 so that we have enough that it's a useful amount to try to bring a company here, or more than one.
Commissioner Naker.
Thanks, Chair Tolbert. Director Goodman, given the difficulty spending down the Business Assistance Fund and the Strategic Investment Fund, I'm curious, when businesses approach your team to ask for assistance, are you first referring them to those funds, or are you telling them to come to us for a year-round STAR? I've noticed a lot more folks coming for year-round STAR, and then noticing, and we have much, much smaller pots than both of these.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair Tolbert. Commissioner Naker, that's an excellent question. We absolutely are going towards the Citywide Business Assistance Fund first. The SIF fund is very specific to businesses who aren't currently in St. Paul. So they have different rules. The Citywide Business Assistance Fund right now is kind of, we look at each possible source of help. Some projects are eligible for CDBG, some are not. Some are, so that we kind of, what we do is we have an intake form and we look at what their needs are. Are they in a qualifying census tract? What kinds of, what's the demographic of the area, and there are many things to look at that will indicate what's the best source. And I would say that year-round STAR should be the last source if we can't find another way to help, and that's how we operate. Is that helpful? Okay.
Director Goodman, on these, and I know how Full Stack does it, but what is our game plan or strategy for actually reaching out to tell businesses about this rather than waiting for them to call?
Certainly. Chair Tolbert, we have put the information on the website. We are using our social media now. We have a new PIO in the past few months. Crystal is fantastic, and she just put up a PED Twitter. I don't know if you have noticed, but in the last month, we have our own Twitter account, and she's done an excellent job. She coordinates with the city PIO, and so we will be doing a whole lot more outreach and much more visibility than we've had in the past.
But more specifically, rather than just social media, are we, when I first was on the city council, we used to proactively, PD would go to businesses, check in to see
Certainly.
how are things, how's employment, do you want to stay here? Hey, I heard you're leaving. Do we have a strategy for that for this year? Or
Chair
how could
Tolbert.
we fund that?
Chair Tolbert, yes, we do. We have a couple of different things we've been doing. One thing is we've reached out to every Bridge Fund recipient business, maybe not all of them, but many of them, hundreds of them, to find out how they're doing, how they are. And we've got one of our new project managers compiling that information for us. We put together a list of questions to kind of see, partly to kind of do some program evaluation on our Bridge Fund work, but that was a great outreach to businesses who we knew we had touch points with. And then we, now that we again have our project managers, hopefully not spending so much time servicing neighborhood STAR loans, the project managers are now out again in the community. Also, COVID was a big dip on the outreach, like the personal in-person outreach. So all of that is ramping back up. Project managers have more time to get out, and we have already started to make phone calls and direct outreach to businesses who we've already had relationships with to check in.
Okay, is there is it just kind of random, or is there a strategy, or is it like, hey, we have a list? I mean, because it's dated now. I think it's from 2013. PD gave it to me, but I have a list of every business in my ward that has more than 10 employees. I mean, are they doing it that way, or how are we strategizing
Chair
this?
Tolbert, we have our Mary Rick is our business development director, so she has worked on that strategy and again led the work to reach out to all of the Bridge Fund recipients. And each of our project managers focus on a geographic area. So I don't know if they each have a list of every business in their geography, but they are all working their geographies and reaching out to businesses and familiar with businesses, visiting businesses. So I can get you more detail on the specific strategy, but know that that is definitely an effort that we have ongoing and have been ramping up and doing much more of.
Okay. And maybe as a follow-up, I know we have probably a list of things for follow-up of just who the project managers are for each area.
Oh,
I think
certainly.
it'd be helpful that maybe we can connect with them and
Yep.
give some things that we're hearing.
Understood. Okay. Civil uprising funding. In December of 2021, the HRA board approved $500,000 in support for LISC's Community Asset Transition, or CAT Fund, and $500,000 to provide the match for deed Main Street projects or to support funding of capital projects for businesses impacted by civil uprising citywide. LISC to date has deployed just over $900,000 for 2 St. Paul projects, not all with our money. They have a lot of other sources. So you might recognize 1351 Arcade and 8 Winter Street. An agreement is in process with LISC that will result in investments in 2 or more projects in St. Paul by the end of the year. And LISC has identified some projects and staff is evaluating those. So that's a little update on the CAT Fund. The St. Paul and Minnesota Foundation received $7 million in Deed Main Street funding for those targeted investments in commercial corridors. Those are the grants that require a huge match. That foundation expects to go live with a solicitation in early fall, and they'll take applications on a rolling basis. So again, staff is working with them to identify eligible projects. The update here is that the temporary TIF has come into place since then, and it could be a good fit for the Main Street program match, which is probably going to go a little bit slower since those projects require construction. We would recommend at this time to reallocate that $500,000 originally programmed for the Deed Main Street match and put it towards the LISC program because they're really moving projects, and then know that if the Deed Main Street funding projects come and they're looking for that match, we can talk about temporary TIF as a good fit. It's something we're proposing to you. I think we're missing the boat if we're not leaning into LISC because they're really making an impact. We can talk about it further later, but I wanted to put that out there while I gave you that update.
Can I ask a question about that?
Certainly.
I thought that the money from deed was grant money and that it does not require a match.
It requires 2
Okay.
to 1 match, Councilmember.
Can you explain the 2 to 1? Like we have to give it twice as much for their 1, or can you explain the ratio?
Certainly. Chair Tolbert, Commissioner Jalali, we don't have to, but the
grantee.
The grantee, a third of it can come from the deed program, and 2/3 of it have to come from another source. So that was a challenge with that program, and it's been a challenge for many communities to get money out the door because it's hard for anyone to find that 2/3 match.
Okay, I'll probably ask more questions offline later. I recognize we're trying to figure out how to get state money into our communities with the requirements there.
Indeed.
So
Indeed.
thank you.
Okay, absolutely. Quickly, this is
Just
my last. Certainly.
Just off of this, it's different, but my understanding, we did not win the award that Greater MSP was applying for.
That's correct.
Is it possible for us to see that application? I think one of the things that we've learned is oftentimes these applications generate good ideas that may be worth funding anyways. And obviously we didn't vote on it or see it here, but I think it would be worth seeing to see if there's ideas in there worth funding out of city money or other resources.
Chair Tolbert, 100% agree with you. And yes, we will get you that application. I think we've kind of gone over it before, but I will bring it back. And that's absolutely true, that these efforts, where they're collaborative efforts and putting together a huge application, it's always worth it, even if we don't get the money, because we've put our heads together and said, these are some things we need to do, so let's do them anyway and find a way. So that's an excellent point. Thank you for bringing that up. And we will get you that application. Okay, last department, Planning Division. I'll outline just the budget strategy for the Planning Division. As with the other departments, we've needed to add a supervisory level to the planning team, which we will do in 2023 through adding one new FTE and repurposing a principal city planner position for the other. So 2 supervisor positions. Long-range planning supervisor who will oversee comprehensive planning, transportation planning, anti-displacement initiatives, resiliency planning, and significant plans required by HUD, like the consolidated plan, which is a huge document. And a current planning supervisor who will oversee zoning ordinance amendments, zoning applications, HUD-mandated and state-mandated environmental reviews, and major redevelopment project planning. So, again, one new FTE, one which is an existing, one new and one existing, and then once we've selected a vendor, we'd had one FTE to support the implementation of the investment tracking system. All of those, though, covered with cost savings and other existing funding, not asking for additional funding for those specific positions. And finally, just some highlights of the Planning Division's accomplishments. Eliminated parking minimums, which was a huge deal. We got national attention for that. It's really important for affordable housing that there not be parking minimums. We adopted phase 1 of the 1 to 4 unit housing study, which facilitates more ADUs on a single family lot and principal homes on larger lots. Again, very important for affordable housing. Adopted the Hillcrest Master Plan. These are all things you know about, but I just wanted to put these sort of just a quick list of some recent accomplishments of the Planning Division, and then remind you that they're working on now is implementing that anti-displacement study, which is that also includes inclusionary zoning and other things that this body has asked for. So we are moving on that. We have HR and NA in place, and they're a fantastic consulting group. Getting the local ordinance, Mississippi River Critical Area Corridor, local ordinance review and adoption over the next few months. Phase 2 of the 1 to 4 unit housing study, a T district zoning study, East Grand Avenue overlay zoning study, and then we're working with the downtown St. Paul Alliance on a downtown development strategy. So we've gone over sort of the overall budget strategy, an update on ARP funded programs, more detail on the budget strategies for each of our divisions. So with that, my presentation is complete, and I'm happy to answer any additional questions that you have. And we will follow up on the items that you asked specifically for.
Great, thank you. And just a couple things if people have, I suspect people want to get out of here and get prepared for council. We are voting on the levy next week. I know I think everybody on this board, we have only looked at this presentation and the budgeting starting this week, or within the last week. So I know that it takes some time to digest it and look at it and figure out the differences in that. And obviously this is a unique board because the HRA is its own tax levy and it funds nearly all of PED. But I know the commissioners haven't been involved in the preparing of this proposed budget, so we got to take some time to look at it and see what changes we should make for our priorities. So I just would recommend maybe at the next HRA meeting to have the staff report maybe be those follow-up items, and then we can delve into some of these. I know there's questions I want to ask, but with the time, I don't want to go down every single rabbit hole here. But there are follow-up questions. I think Commissioner Naker and others have flagged them, and if we have a few more, we can tell Holly to pass and have her pass them on to you. But just want to remind everybody next week would be the levy vote, and then I think it'd be good to have a follow-up at the next HRA meeting. Any questions or comments?
Thank you, Chair Tolbert. We'll be prepared to bring that staff report on the follow-up items and anything else that you reach out to us about to follow up on between now and then.
Great. Thank you. I think that brings us to the end of this, and I'll see everybody in about 15 minutes. We're adjourned.